UK cinema history, Henry V, 1944, directed by Laurence Olivier, with Eric Trommater, Yassi Soufi, Hy Bender, and Matt Bradley. Hello, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I was listening to Don's room and lost track of time. Appreciate you both being here, though. Can everybody hear me okay? I don't have my microphone today because I'm at work.
You sound great.
Good enough. Good enough. Thank you both for being here. Hy Bender and Yassi Soufi. We may get Scylla today. If we do, he's going to be at work, though. He got called in. A darn real life. It happens, but we'll take him as much as we can get him. But I definitely appreciate both of you being here. It's what really makes this room great. Let me just mod Hy real quick. And I want to take a moment to thank Yassi. She has put us on to Apple Podcasts. So we're now available on Apple Podcasts, and I'm going to put that link up in a minute. Appreciate Yassi doing that. Again, this is a convenience. We're not going to try and jam this down your throat. However you want to listen to this show is up to you. I'm not going to be, but Yassi and I on Saturday at 9 a.m. are going to be doing a little promos just to kind of see if maybe we can use these different formats to get more people to come into these rooms. So we're just kind of going to talk about, I took a time to schedule out through the end of July the films that are coming out in the future. Maybe if we can get the word out earlier, people can see the films earlier, and we'll get more participation in the room. The key here is not, I want more people to listen on iTunes, or I want more people to listen on Spotify. The key is I want more people to participate in these conversations. So that's pretty much all of our business end.
I would just say those are both worthy goals. You can want both things. They're not mutually exclusive.
Very true, Hy. Very true. However, there's only so many hours in the week, and I just can't. I just don't want to put in the kind of effort it would take to get a large enough audience for to justify a podcast. The begging, hey, like me, blah blah blah, spamming, talking to other podcasters to see if I can get on their show. All of that, I don't have the time to do that. I'm not saying
Eric,
that's something in the future.
Eric, if this is on Apple, if this is on iTunes, then it's a podcast. By definition, it's happened.
Okay, yeah, you got me on that one. I can't argue, but what I'm saying is I don't have the time to focus on that side of it at this point. I may at a future date. But my point at this point is I would like to have more people in these rooms, more so that we can get a wider conversation. For instance, last week, when we were able to kind of have a conversation about a Canterbury Tale, in which not everybody in the room liked the film. By the way, what the hell is wrong with you? No, I'm joking. But that kind of a diversity is what I'm actually going for. Not necessarily I want people to come in and shit on these movies, because of course that would get old real quick, but maybe get a more diverse view. Also, maybe a more diverse crowd. I would like, more people of color, perhaps. Definitely need more female representation in the room. More is better as far as I'm concerned. I don't just want this to be an echo chamber. And so that is what my goal is. If something happens the other way, hey, that'd be great too. But that wasn't why we chose to do what we did.
Well, I just want to point out, because I think that sometimes you're so close to things that you're not seeing it clearly. The level of knowledge and insight and research that you bring to this room is beyond podcast level quality. So, no matter how many people are in it or are listening to it, you're doing a podcast level show because of what you bring to it and what others bring to it. So it doesn't matter, and now it literally is a podcast if it's on iTunes, but it was always the level of a conversation always really high, and the level of knowledge that you bring to these films is just is just amazing. So I just don't want you I just want you to be aware of the quality of these rooms in large measure because of what a phenomenal um, expert you are on these films, how much time and thought you've put into watching them and thinking about them and researching them. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, thank you, Hi. It means a lot to me. I will say I was very pleased to see that If is gotten the most listens of all of the shows that we've done, which is one of our more obscure films. And when it comes to my goal, which is to get more people to see these films, I think that's a that's a good sign. But moving on, I think we can start the show now, since I came in late. But since Yazzie launched the show, we're going to let her start us off with her opening reflections on. Was this your first viewing of the 1944 version of Henry the Fourth, or is this something you'd seen before?
By the pricking of my thumb, something wick. No, that was not it. What?
That's got
Double,
it,
double.
Clay.
No, that was something else. No, it started like a guilty thing upon a. No, that wasn't that it. Romeo, Romeo. No, wait. We've done so many Shakespeare. I mean, we have to move on from Shakespeare in movies, please. Yes, it was my first viewing of this one. I've seen Hamlet so many times. I've seen Richard III from Olivier so many times. But yeah, that was my first viewing of Henry V. And what a dreamy, uh, very fairy tale like. The aesthetic of the film was like looking at a medieval painting, and the ending very romantic, was like a fairy tale, a very emotional connection, and above all that uh meta aspect of the film that was so well depicted, aligned with the way that Shakespeare himself started his play. I think we're going to talk about it later a bit more. We're gonna like dissect that part because that's very important to the film and to the Shakespearean play. Um, what else okay, of course, historical fact, when the play came out, just I mean, so similar to the way to the historical events when the movie was made, just like, and uh of course it's like so obvious. Henry V famous speech, so similar to "We Shall Fight" speech of Churchill, and no wonder that Churchill like wanted the movie to be made. No wonder that it was there's there was a very sense of patriotism of Olivier uh, infused in the film. So I'm gonna stop here, so we can talk about everything a little bit more later. as we go on to the conversation.
Thank you, Yazzie. We didn't get a big crowd today, but we happy few, we band of brothers. For he or she today that sheds their blood with me shall be my brother or sister, be he never so vile. Hi, Bender. First of all, what's your experience with this production, or Henry the Fifth in general? Your opening thoughts, and then you usually also treat us with some facts behind the movies, and I'd like to. I'm definitely looking forward to that part as well.
Thank you, Eric. Uh, so timing really matters. I have never read Henry V or seen it before. And as someone who is new to it, when the king starts talking about invading France, because their land is really his land, and really he should be the king of all of it, to my ear in 2024, it sounded like Vladimir Putin making his arguments for invading Ukraine. So, in other words, it sounded monstrous. Um, so the timing really matters. But at the time in 1944, this was a perfect movie to inspire the British people who were suffering through their fifth year of war with Germany. In fact, according to IMDb, during the filming of a battle scene, they had to stop because there were a group of German bombers on their way to bomb London, and a group of British fighters showed up to try to knock them out of the sky. So there was an actual aerial battle happening above their heads while they were filming. They had to pause their Shakespearean battle for a real battle that was happening in the sky. And then when it passed over them, they resumed their battle with France. What an amazing thing! But that's why the movie was happening, was because there was a real war going on, and it really did inspire people. It was a very successful film, and even though and I think it's the first Shakespeare film that actually was commercially successful. Um, and as for Churchill, the let's see, the British government commissioned Olivier to make the movie. The most significant cuts to the text were the ones which provoked criticism of Henry as a king, and reputedly those cuts were made at the request of Winston Churchill. At the same time, the French royalty was depicted as arrogant and uncivilized and rude, and they were stand-ins for the Nazis. So it was very much, even though it was Shakespeare, it was very much a movie of a certain place and time. It was filmed at a budget of two. It was made for $2 million, which was making the most expensive British production ever at that point. Um, and nonetheless, it did end up making a profit, not until 1949, but because of how expensive it was. But it did end up making a profit. Um, but they were also dealing with wartime rationing. So, for example, the chainmail armor in the movie was made of hand knitted gray wool. Most of the costumes and weaponry were made from clothing clothing scraps, and wood was painted silver. Um, it was, it's a movie about a war happening during another war, and I think it's a beautifully made film. I love the recreation of actual Shakespearean times, but it's also a film that was addressing a particular moment in history, and was successful at that, even though me watching it cold in 2024, the aggressiveness towards, the hell with France. They don't deserve our land. Let's go and invade them and kill tens and thousands of them, because really we should we should own all the land. To me, it really had echoes of Putin in Ukraine. So it's history is tricky. Those are my opening remarks.
Thanks, Hi. Well, I first want to reflect that it's actually been 40 years since I saw this film. It's now 80 years old the first time. And the first time I saw it was in 1984 when it was re-released as part of a retrospective on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, and was shown with films like The Longest Day and other war films as part of propaganda. And as you pointed out, Hi, the propaganda of the film probably doesn't play as well today. And Branagh obviously had taken the same story and made it into an anti-war film in a way. And I think that there was a reflection when Chimes of Midnight, with Orson Welles, when he created his battle scenes, that the mood towards war had changed because wars had become something of aggression as opposed to protecting yourself against an evil enemy. That there were no just the bad guys the way they were with the Nazis. But the thing that I reflect on from being a 14-year-old boy seeing this the first time was that loving recreation of the globe, because historically this was actually the very first play ever performed at the Globe, which is a great story. Um, so it was 1599, and the owner of the property where the Shakespeare's company was performing had raised their rent and was refusing to let them use the theater. So they took it down board by board and just moved it across town and recreated a different theater. And that's when they created the theater in the round in the open center that you see in the beginning. And in his introduction to the screenplay version of this, Olivier points out that Shakespeare, through his chorus, is almost asking for a movie to be made. And the line that he quotes is a direct reference to this being the very first play ever performed at the Globe. You know, um, the flat unraised spirits that hath dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object, can this cockpit hold the vastly fields of France, or maybe cram within this wooden O, which was of course the shape of the Globe Theater, where it got its name from, the very cast that did affright the air in Agincourt. That and so what Olivier was trying to overcome with his recreation of Elizabethan England and recreation of that first performance in 1600 was the objection that you can't put Shakespeare on film because you demean Shakespeare by putting it on film, which was a very large a portion of people, especially in the theatrical community, just really had a snobbish view towards film as a medium. And it's very hard for us to have this perspective, but sound recording on film was only 15 years old when this film was made. You know, that the first talkie came out in 1929, and this film came out in 1944, and so their reasons for this were all technical. And what I love is how Olivier overcame all of those things. For instance, how are you going to recreate the might and majesty of the language through these recordings and using film actors? He didn't use film actors. And when he did use film actors, there's for small parts like the chorus, or for the comic parts the Falstaff's death scene in here, which of course he had transposed from Henry IV because Falstaff actually dies off stage in the original play, or Bardo, or and of course most of all Pistol, who is kind of taken over for the as the comic relief for John Falstaff in this, and um, and he got a legitimate great composer to create a soundtrack that I still to this day rank as my favorite film soundtrack of all time. The music in this is wonderful. And it is one of the few film soundtracks where I can just sit and they released an album of this with Christopher Plummer reciting just the speeches, just the chorus, and the three main speeches, and then the rest was 45 minutes of just the music. And I wore out a copy of that on back when things were on wax in those days, and had to go buy another one. And because, but it is interesting because even when it comes to the score on this, and it is too bad that Seal is not here because he has more expertise on this, that almost all of the music in this is composed in a minor key. The opening choral is actually just kind of like a G minor scale, bum, 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 and and um so even in the big battle scenes, you don't have big, bright, brash music, and it goes so well with the images, but it is just beautiful on its own. But the thing is, when you remove it from the images, it's very sober and very somber sounding music, and it is beautiful in a sad and kind of reflective way, which gives the film the kind of depth that you get when you watch a great theatrical performance of Henry V. I have one more thought about this, and instead of going back to 1944, I kind of want to go back to 1600 when this premiered, because when this play was in the theaters, England and most of Europe was going through one of the worst famines in its history. And when they were looking back to the late 14 teens and early 1420s, when this film took place, or when this play at the time took place, they were actually looking back at a salad days of English history. So to put things into perspective, the plague had killed off such a large amount of the population in the 1350s that the remaining peasants, as they were called, could demand higher wages. And so when they do geological studies, when they look at the remains of people from the what are called the Lancastrian kings, which is Henry IV, V, and VI, despite that being one of the worst times as far as England goes, you had the War of the Roses, you had Civil War, you had the 100 Years' War. The life expectancy of your average Englander was longer. Their quality of life, their quality of living space, their quality of diet were all better than at any time in English history up until after the Industrial Revolution. That the decline actually began once the kings and queens of England weren't at war with each other. You didn't, and weren't at war with France, and could kind of focus on England, because when the Tudors came to power in the 1490s, they had, what was actually happening was they were reversing all of the gains that the everyday people had, and the life expectancy and quality of life of the average person from England had taken a complete and total nosedive. And while it wasn't within the living memory of these people, they had things like Holinshed's Chronicles and what have you. And so they would look back at that time and say, gosh, why can't England be like that? It had nothing to do with the conquering of France. In real life, Henry V died trying to take a town in Normandy. He shit himself to death from camp disease, which the fate of most of the soldiers that went over there. But back in England, the crime rate was low, because where were most of the criminals? They were serving in the army in France and doing what they would have been doing to the English people, to France at the king's bequest. So, and those are my opening thoughts. But a question that I did have is, do you feel that being able to watch this after Chimes at Midnight give you a better sense of Henry as a character, because you got to see young Hal growing up? Or do you feel like you were watching two completely different people? And I'll start with Yassi on that one.
No, for sure, they both, I think Olivier and Orson Welles, they both had different interpretation of Henry V, the character. But I see, like, Olivier's portrayal, he emphasizes on the king's charisma, his leadership qualities. That's exactly after, I think that's why we see that tonal shift right at the beginning of the film after Falstaff's death. And what was striking to me was that I figured that Orson Welles paid a great homage to Olivier in his Chimes of Midnight, after, on the scene after Falstaff's death, when that lady, she says that people say, yeah, Falstaff is dead, and right now he's going to, and she says, no, he goes to Arthur's bosom in heaven. And that scene was pretty, I mean, even the camera movements were almost similar to Olivier's film, what we see here. What I really liked was that, yeah, that opening scene. I'm gonna talk about the opening scene later, the meta aspects of it all. But right now, to answer to your question, I think what happens here was that, and also it says, Henry says it at the beginning of the film, that it comes to Falstaff as his, he as his you know illusion, delusion, or the last thing that he hears in his head, his nightmarish kind of sound, feverish sounds before his death, that Henry's telling him that, yeah, that aspect of my life is over, and now I'm moving to this king uh era of my life. This I outgrow you. Yeah, I know, I don't know that part of his life. And that happens within the visuals of the film. We see it's presented to us as a theater, like a globe theater, but then suddenly we see the camera moves, like the zoom back and then the zoom into that window, that Falstaff is dying, and he hears Henry V, and then it continues, to a king. It's not that playful, childish character that we see in Chimes at Midnight. That, like, the big portion of that film is the part that he's partying with Falstaff. But this movie, we see how he is like a war hero. It's and but I think also we see this. I think what is very fascinating about Olivier's performance is that even though his movie looks so, colorful with this, palette colors and technicolors and very Wizard of Oz dreamy like, and as I said, looks like a medieval painting, very fairy tale like. Olivia's performance sometimes, shows this uh depth of what Henry has been through, what he went through to become this king, all the wars, all the battles that he has been in very young age, and his alienation with his father, and everything that he's been through. We can hear it in his sound, and all this complex character, the complexity of this pers- of his personality, and the way that he delivers the the Shakespeare's dialogue, with their especially like in the speech. Again, I'm going to talk about it later from a very linguistic point of view, but it's like his evolution from that childish Henry in Chimes of Midnight to this uh king, charismatic, and leader king that he is right now. We kind of see it in Olivia's performance, and of course there are like so many, you know uh course, like Chimes of Midnight, the character focus is different. The character focus over there is mostly on Falstaff. Here is mostly on uh, Henry V. That's the other. But you said, if you know, do we think that we know him? Of course, we see his growth, and as I said, we see his evolution, and that's very fascinating. It's from Prince Hal to King Henry V, as I can put.
That's great, Yazzie. And yes, we will allow you to, as you put it, get all millennial on this film later and talk about the meta aspects. Hi, yeah, because that was also your first viewing of Chimes at Midnight. Did you think you got a better understanding of this film from having experienced Chimes at Midnight first? Like the Bardolph and the pistol characters, for instance, and Falstaff's death. Did they make a little bit more sense to you?
Well, first, I want to agree with Yazi in the sense that, and with you, one of the great charms of this movie is a direct creation of the original Shakespeare theater and the look and feel of what that was like back then. That's a magnificent achievement. It's magnificent that they even had the thought of doing that. Olivier said he did it because he wanted to ease people into the audience into the Shakespearean language, and he thought that would be a way to do it. I don't entirely believe him. I think the main reason he did it is because it was just delicious to do that for someone who really loved Shakespeare to be able to recreate the original uh, uh, theater and actors and audience. I mean, they even they recreated how the audience would react to that play at that time and place. So I just think it was a delicious thing to do. If that's the only thing it did, it would be a notable film. I also agree. So I'm agreeing with you there. I'm agreeing with Yazi that there's a great blend of different elements to lend this nuance and complexity. The colors are amazing, and they pop at almost a comic book level. At the same time, there is a depth to Olivier's performance. In answer to your question, um, I really feel that, first of all, Chimes of Midnight, I'm very grateful I saw it. I know your rationalization was to prepare us for this film. I think Chimes of Midnight is actually the better film than this film. So it wasn't as a way to, to introduce us to this as an
Buy your next
appetizer.
car
I think
from
Chimes of
Mater,
Midnight
you'll
was the
thank
main
yourself
course.
later
But
for service long.
I honestly, and you may not like this perspective, but I'm just going to be honest. Um, my feeling
Buy your
was,
next car
again,
from
because I had
Mater,
that
you'll
kind of
thank yourself
Putin
later.
vibe from this invasion thing, as someone who doesn't know the history, and maybe there were amazingly wonderful reasons for killing tens of thousands of Frenchmen, but just based on, and of course Shakespeare's audience would know that history, so it didn't need to be explained. But for me, coming in cold,
Buy your next car
my
from
feeling
Mater, you'll
was
thank yourself
honestly,
later
if
for
this is
service
what
long
Hal
after the
uh,
sale.
needed to grow
There's
up to
no
do,
better
to
deal
go
on
and
your
invade a
next
neighbor
set of
and
wheels.
kill a whole bunch of them, it wasn't worth sacrificing Falstaff and stabbing Falstaff, not in the back, in the front. It wasn't worth it. If that's what he needed to do to be a grown up, uh, I wasn't worth growing up. So that was my emotional feeling about it. That's not the film. That's Shakespeare's play I'm reacting to. And again, I don't know the history, but that's my honest answer. I'm not. I'm not making any claims about what's right or wrong because I don't know. I don't know the history. But as someone's come to it cold, that was my emotional reaction. So that's just my honest response. I do want to also say you were talking about the trepidation of doing justice to Shakespeare in film, and in fact, Olivier uh, had the courage to put Shakespeare on film in part because of his experience working under William Wyler, who directed Wuthering Heights. And Wyler was a very, very knowledgeable and skilled director. He was kind of mean to his actors, but he was really good at what he did. And Olivier says uh, Olivier credited Wyler for teaching him how to give a more subtle performance in movies and for giving him more respect for the art of acting in movies. And so Olivier offered William Wyler the the job of directing this movie. And Wyler declined, saying, "If it's William Shakespeare, it must be you." And then Olivier talked it over with Carol Reed and Ralph Richardson, and they both told him the same thing. And that's how he came to direct this. Also, just a few quick casting things while I'm at it. Uh, Olivier asked John Gielgud, oh no, John Gielgud asked Olivier to be cast as the chorus in the movie, but Olivier declined, instead offering him the role of King of France, and Gielgud said turn that down. So that's why Gielgud isn't in the film. Um, and Vivian Lee very much wanted to play Catherine from France, but David O. Selznick wouldn't let Vivian Lee out of her contract with Selznick International, feeling the role was too small for an actress of her status at the time. Vivian Lee never forgave Selznick, and she never worked for him again. So the actress who got the part was Renee Asherson, who I thought was terrific in it, by the way. But she says she got the part because she could fit into the costumes that already had been made for Vivian Lee. I think she's probably being overly modest, but I thought that's an interesting. The real life Princess Catherine was around 14 years old at the time, whereas Renee Asherson was 29. So that's a little bit of a creative license. So those are things I wanted to share.
And of course,
Yeah.
Renee Asherton we saw last week in uh, um, uh, Canterbury Town. Go ahead, yes.
No, I just wanted to say, like, it's kind of explained at the, that at the right at the beginning of the film, like when uh the the messengers, he comes and gives, like she says that, uh he brings that the tennis ball, based on the stories, uh and everything, that, and they start to explain that why it's this war is happening, and it's, I mean, why British uh are entitled to French throne. And he explains the Salic law that in medieval, was a medieval law code that, during the Frankish kingdom, as a matter of the fact, it started, and then French monarchs, they adapted it. That, it says that the it only the line of succession only goes to male uh kings. Only male uh can inherit the throne. And since, that's very Game of Thrones here, Game of Thrones, and very, House of Dragons, that when King Charles the Fourth uh was known as the Mad King, just like the Targaryen king in Game of Thrones, he has no heir but Catherine. So, and that was the moment that Edward III, he claimed, just because Edward III mom, and that part goes to Eric, you can explain that part better, was French. So, Isabella de France. And that's why he claimed the throne. And then, just because King Richard the Fourth, he had no male successors, so they find this opportunity to go and reclaim England. And, in France, as we see in the movie, they
Charles,
have the
Charles the
bigger,
Fifth.
yeah, they have the bigger land, they have the better army, they have the better, the biggest population, which was so important at that time to regain power for a monarch, and all that. And then comes the War of Roses and everything afterwards, that ended with, and of course, the that part that I think I can explain was all the inner conflicts, not wars, but inner conflicts within the, French court. As we see in the movie, like they just give in the Normans, like they give the castle to Henry V. They say, yeah, you can have it because we're unhappy with what's going on in our country, with our leaders. So all those things, causes this, they don't just decide to go and invade France. It was actually a law, written law, that allows them to do it. And, they justify them to do it. And all the Edward III's relationship with the France, and then later they signed the Treaty of Troyes within them, that we see also in the movie, that comes with the, also they give Catherine on the treaty as a land, they just give her up to Henry V. But that's very sweet depiction of that part, very fairy tale like, very Disney like in the film, that we can also talk about it later. But I think how that part of history is used by Olivier is more important than actual historic fact. And it's that I think he uses that as a metaphor of, just because at that time, historically, at the time of the movie, because, we see Shakespeare has been adopted, by many people after that. Uh, and what Olivia started was that, what he made possible, he paved the way for the rest of the filmmaker, was that you can adapt this very rich text, to the current history for the, you know, and made it more accessible for the audience at the time. And of course, that time, like, yeah, British, they were going to England, to France, to, for, they didn't want to claim the land, but actually they were going to have a war on the French, on the French land. So historically, the parallels are very interesting. And yeah, so I think, sorry, Eric, the British part, with Edward III and everything about that, I think you can explain it better.
Well, I just want to briefly say what I found most persuasive for the rationalization for the war was set in Chimes at Midnight, which was we got a lot of internal conflict in England. We've got civil wars and insurrections. Let's give the people something that they can unite around, an enemy outside of England. Let's direct their energies towards that instead of having the internal conflict. Let's pick a fight with our neighbor. That I found that as the most credible explanation for it. But of course, in the context of when the movie is made, um, Britain is actually fighting the most and arguably the most evil force in history. God bless them for fighting and for killing as many of them as possible. Because we're on this war kick, I started watching some other war movies. So this week I watched The Guns of Navarone, and one of the characters is asked, uh, ha- "Have you killed any people?" And he said, "No, only Nazis and a few Italians." And so that's that's kind of the feeling that you're fighting this existential evil, and so you don't really need to do a lot of rationalizations for going into battle. You're fighting for the future of humankind. So I'm just saying that for me, there's kind of I'm watching it in two different ways because that it was made for a time, and I'm living in a different time.
Yeah, but no, what I was trying to say was that it was, it's not the rationalization, it was actually written at the law of that time, in the Salic law, that was a medieval law, that if the French monarch doesn't have a male inherit to the throne, England can come and claim the land, just like that. And King Edward III, actually, he applied that rule, uh, and he claimed the French throne. But as you said, because of all the inner fights within the legitimacy of the kings in England, and all the problems that they had, they couldn't actually move their army to France and claim the land that was actually lawfully, as we can put it, by the law of the time, theirs at that time.
I want to welcome Kathy to the room, great friend of the Now I Guess We're a podcast, and also thank her for sharing us on social media. We love you, Kathy, and it's great to see you here. I'm gonna keep it under 5 minutes, but we're gonna do pedant's corner for just a moment. So this is the pedant's corner portion of the show. Those who don't want a history lesson, just skip the next 5 minutes. So Salic law is bullshit, but so was Edward the Third's claim to the throne. Edward knew it was bullshit. All he wanted was uh, Calais, Port de Calais, which they call Calais in the play because they anglicized it, and The claim was that because his mother was the sister of Charles IV, that when Charles IV uh, died without an heir, the throne would pass to him the next in line. And of course, since it didn't, it went to the Armagnacs, and the Armagnac family, which were cousins, were at war with the Burgundians. And so, as he pointed out, it was the civil war in France over who was in charge that England was able to take advantage of. But when the initial invasions took place in back in the 1350s, Edward III was simply using his claim to the throne of France as a bargaining chip to get his hands on the lands that were already his, but not have to pay homage to the French king for. But what actually High is absolutely correct, and there's of course the scene which was in Henry the Fourth Part Two, which was in Chimes at Midnight, where Henry the Fourth advises his son get involved in a foreign conflict, get get the troops out of here, restart this war, because the war had been at a 28-year truce that had been started under Richard II, because he didn't want to make war against other Christian rulers, and because he didn't want to have to continue to raise taxes. Otherwise, we're going to be torn apart the same way France is being torn apart. And he was talking about Harry Hotspur's rebellion and what have you, and that was Henry V's motivation. And in fact, when he first went and he said, I just want those lands that Edward III was granted with the same rights and not to pay homage, he was given carte blanche. And it was only when the French said, yeah, sure, you can have that he said, oh, wait, no, I should actually be king of France, because was only king of England because of the application of the same Salic law that he was claiming did not apply to the French. Because, of course, as we saw in Chimes at Midnight, Mortimer was the actual descendant of the oldest daughter of Edward III, and so Mortimer should have been the King of England, and he was even named by Richard II. And but because John of Gaunt was the oldest surviving son, they allowed uh, um, uh, Henry IV, Henry V's father, to take the throne. So yes, the whole invasion was bullshit. Which, if you watch either the Branagh version or the recent recent comparatively the 2010s BBC adaptation, or read the Shakespeare play, a lot is actually made of the fact that that Henry's claim is actually bullshit, and that Henry did not expect to actually win France. And it was actually rather disastrous for England that they won France, because they were a tiny little island where it rains all the time, that had nowhere near enough money to administer a country with 4.5 times the population. And and there was no way they were going to be able to hold on to it. And when he was busy shitting himself to death, the last thing that Henry V had actually asked for is that they trade all of their other uh, uh, towns that they had won for control of just those areas that Edward III had demanded the first time, and he was actually asking for what he had actually turned down. So High is correct. Yes, this was a bullshit invasion, and 10,000 Frenchmen died at Agincourt. But of course, the play makes it sound like they had a big pitched battle at Agincourt, and that that was what won the. I know my 5 minutes is running out, and that was what won France for them. That was not the case. The fact of the matter is the Council of Bruges took place years after Agincourt, because Henry had gone town by town by town, siege by siege. Pitched battles were very rare in the Hundred Years' War, because the English were very good at pitched battles, and the French knew that. The French were very good at attacking supply lines, guerrilla tactics, and preparing towns for sieges and making it as hard as possible for the English. And Henry had fought year after year after year, and it was only after enough towns had fallen that he was allowed the overlordship of France, and that his son Henry VI, who with Catherine, who inherited his father's mental illness, was crowned king of both England and France. And within 20 years, all that was left of their French possession was the port of Calais, which didn't get lost until Mary Tudor over 130 years later. So High is correct, and the play, when not used as propaganda, actually shows that, and has a scene that was cut out in which Henry V takes, I think it was Fleur, France, by threatening to put all of their children's heads on spikes. Of course, that's cut out of the film because it was propaganda. The play had an ending from the chorus that explained that, and everything that was won was lost by Henry's son, Henry VI. And of course, Shakespeare wrote 3 parts of Henry VI, explaining in great detail how France was lost. And so, this was a piece of wartime propaganda, and a darn effective one. If you go to movies looking for historical accuracy, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. But I agree with High that I think Chimes at Midnight is definitely a better film. But I think Chimes at Midnight, I have said before, is one of my favorite films of all time. This, on the other hand, I think is just a great work of art. End of Pedant's Corner. Uh, Yazzie, I think it's time you went a millennial on our asses and explained the meta references in Henry V as seen through the millennials' eye.
Yeah, of course, but I mean, even we talked about it when we were talking in King Lear, that Shakespeare, there is no historical accuracy in Shakespeare. I mean, there are the definitions. I mean, they categorize it as the historic plays, and the more fictional plays, and this one, there always been fights over uh Henry V, whether it is historically accurate or not. But I can say that Olivier's uh adaptation is not at all accurate. First of all, their look. I mean, Henry V, we all know that he has that famous scar on his cheek. It's not here in this film. And but going back to the only thing I wanted to say, that it is in the movie, that's why I'm bringing it up, is that Dauphin, the crown prince Dauphin of, you know with the battle of Armagnac and everything, Burgundies, the rivals of Burgundies, everything that happens, that cause, what I wanted to say was also historically accurate, not the way that it's presented in the film, of course. It wasn't that the leader of that town sits at the gate of the city and says, like, yeah, come here, you're welcome. But it's that the French, they welcomed British in Normandy. They actually kind of, it's true that they don't claim it.
The Burgundians, not the
It
Armagnacs. The Burgundians did, not the Armagnacs.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
The Burgundians
You know,
welcomed them because Charles was mad. He thought that he was made of glass and that if you touched him, he would shatter. And they just
yeah, yeah,
wanted
that,
a working king. They didn't care where he was
yeah,
from.
yeah, yeah. The Burgundians happened after the Battle of Agincourt, but before that, like that the city that they started, they just walked in. That it's funny. What was funny to me was that Henry and Olivier's adaptation, he was keep saying like, be nice to them, don't kill everybody, like don't kill the prisoners, be nice, have mercy on them. But we know historically Henry, he did a few crazy things of his own, like after the Battle of Agincourt, he like killed. After they killed French killed the esquires. Here, it's depicted as a very beautiful, heroic battle of knights that he charts toward uh, the French, and that very dramatic scene with the swords. But we all know that he says like, kill all the prisoners of war. That's actually what happened. So anyway, uh, what I was
Which is a
trying
war
to say was
crime.
that, yeah, 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 of course, it was also a war problem at that time, also. But yeah, they just the French, they were actually happy with British to come and conquer them of sort. That's history. That's like, it wasn't really an invasion, because we see, that's what I really like, that juxtaposition of what Olivier does here, is that how he shows the British army versus the French army, how they were all about the fashion, quote unquote. And their horses, they were showing off, they were talking like, yeah, there were serenades about my horse, and they talk about the beauty of their horses and their armors, and how chic their armors are, and how beautiful their armors are, and how everything about their camp is beautiful, it's set so beautifully. And I really like that. The commanders, that they put like a piñata on the horse, that was hilarious. I think that the way that that is the spirit of what was happening at the time was pretty much similar to what happened during the World War with France. We all know that you know, uh, so many fashion designers in France during the World War, they give in to the Nazis. They worked for the Nazis of sort, because they all wanted to live, and that spirit, that Churchill spirit of, just like what Hai said, that yeah, war is necessary sometimes to save humanity, to save the land for the future, of for the next generation. That is a very British spirit. And France, I think they kind of lost it by the Second World War, because of all these inner fights that we're just talking about, historic.
I have a real quick story to tell about the actual goings on. If you've heard it before, bear with me. But it's the story of the bridge at Monterey, and we see the Dauphin, the French Dauphin, in this as kind of a silly character, boastful and what have you. But one of the collaborators that you were talking about from the Burgundians when the English invaded was a man by the name of John the Fearless, who had arranged an assassination in 1407 of the Duke of Orleans that had set off that civil war between him and the Armagnacs. And the Dauphin had lured him to a bridge at Monterey um, for what was supposed to be a peace negotiation, and it was a covered bridge. But then, as soon as John the Fearless entered, both sides of the bridge came up. He was trapped there, and John the Fearless was assassinated by an axe to the back of his head. And um, and this was what allowed Henry V to become the King of England, because the Dauphin, by being involved in that, was taken out of the line of succession by his own father, and that is what allowed Henry to marry Catherine and be given the regency of France. And years later, when they were when France had kind of regained a foothold from the English, and they were moving John the Fearless's body that had just been disposed to try, give it a decent burial. Um, One of the men picked up his skull with the hole in the back where the axe had been, and he pointed at that hole and he said, "You see this hole? That's the hole the English used to get into France." So that's the real story of how Henry became king. I'm telling that story from memory. I may have gotten a few facts wrong, but that's the spirit of what happened.
The moral to me is don't have a name that's anything the fearless, because then you feel pressure to put yourself into perilous situations where you can be ambushed and assassinated.
Yeah, but I still would have loved to have been nicknamed Eric the Bloody Axe. I just think that would have been a kick-ass nickname. I'm sorry, I'm sticking with that. But I did want to discuss another.
Oh, the meta.
Well, we'll get to meta in 5 seconds, Yazzie. Because I did want to discuss before we get too far away from the film that something that we talked about briefly, which was the beautiful three-strip Technicolor photography, and this was the very first color film that Robert Krasker had ever made. Now we know and love Krasker as of course the man who brought us that wonderful dark world of the Third Man, of the David Lean films, including a Brief Encounter, but it was it's very interesting to see this in this digital restoration as opposed to the prints that I had seen before. Yeah, High had used the word comic book, like, and yeah, the brightness of the colors is just so wonderful, and it is something that up until this digital restoration you didn't see before. And I'm thinking of that very ending scene where when you see Olivier in that outfit with the fleur de lis all over his pants, and his family emblem on over his vest and great coat, and that's a detail that I had never seen before on my old VHS copy, because you couldn't see it because it just wasn't that clear. But I did remember seeing it, but not knowing what it meant, not knowing what family crests were, and things like that. When I was 14, when I originally saw it when it was projected in its original 35 millimeter in the theater, and what a wonderful and loving job they did in restoring this film. I watched it on Criterion, but then I watched it again today just to refresh myself, just on the YouTube copy, which is a 1020 print as opposed to the 4K version that was on Criterion, and it is just so magnificent, but anyway, I just didn't want to get too far away from the technical accomplishments of the film.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. I just want to mention a little factoid. It's also the first Technicolor movie ever made of a Shakespeare play. I just wanted to add that. I'm really glad you mentioned all that, Eric.
Thanks, Hi. Okay, Yazzie.
No, no, no.
Time to get on.
I just wanted to say about the uh, and the thing is, it happened despite all the limitation and everything during the war, because that was the only camera available for at Olivier's disposal to make it this colorful with technicolors and everything, and what I the dynamic, he I think that it this I keep saying it like it's like a medieval uh uh drawing, it's like a medieval illustration. It's because it gives the movie this medieval authenticity and the atmosphere it creates with the colors, with the haircuts, this, and also the lightings, the lights. Uh, it might look very, when we look at it, it might look very stagey and very flat, but as a matter of fact, it's, you know, at night, I think those scenes at night are in British camp, it's very beautiful. And we kind of see, and all the zoom in zoom outs, like one of the one of what I found really
Well,
fascinating was
technically, they
during.
hadn't invented zoom lens yet, Yazzie. Those are dollies. They actually put a camera on track, had somebody pulling
Yeah,
focus,
exactly,
basically had to
exactly,
move
that's what I wanted to say.
380
The
pound
camera,
camera.
yeah, exactly, that's what they did. They moved the camera on dolly, on rails, towards the actor, and then move them back. And then just imagine the set that they put to create all this. And you see it during
Those scenes
the
were shot
you
in
know
Ireland because of what High had said, which was that because there were air battles actually still going on over the sky in England, they had to end up moving. So Agincourt ended up being recreated in Ireland.
yeah, but during the speech, during the very famous Agincourt speech, what happens is that, and I think that's very beautifully done, is that the king, I mean Henry, he starts walking, and then the camera walks with him. At this, before, at Southampton, the camera is on him, he's on the horse, the soldiers are beneath him, are below him, he's higher than them. And then the camera goes back, and then goes high to, behind the soldier that is standing on that catapult or cannon. But, and then it goes back into his close up. But during, I mean, this time, just because we need this feeling, he needs this to create this motivation. He starts walking among the soldiers at the same level of the soldiers, and the camera moves with him. And then the soldiers slowly gather behind him, then in front of him, like circle him. And then the camera moves with him, stops with him, and then it goes back to give us this landscape, this perspective of all the camp and all the soldiers that are with him. That it's, again, I always say that how much I love it, and the technique aspects of the movie aligns with the themes of the film. And
And Olivia
for
delivers
this
those lines
speech,
with his back to the camera. Think of the confidence you must have as an actor.
exactly. I mean, the way that and obviously, I mean, that's so clear that why Churchill loves this specific play. I said it at the beginning because, you know, uh, we never see him during the war. At the beginning of the war, people didn't see him deliver his speeches. And then later comes the radio, we hear him, and then, we see the footages of him. But that's exactly what Olivier does here. And I think that's why that's so important from historic fact at the time for this movie. Like this movie speaks to the history of the time that it's made more than the historic fact of British history of sort.
Cry Harry, England, and St. George. But we'll get to your meta in just a moment. But I had one other thing, just so that I've got all my notes crossed off and it doesn't get forgotten. This is the last thing I've got in my notes. Of the scenes that Olivier included, things like the death of Falstaff, the Pistol and Bardolph and the Welshman making Pistol eat the leak out of his hat, that the symbol that the Welsh wear for St. David's Day and things like that. That would have even been obscure, of course, to 1944 audiences that weren't super familiar with the the play. The most interesting one that he keeps is that scene between in French between Queen Catherine and his and her handmaid, and it's a very subtle scene, but and which is, it's a very good thing that Olivier didn't decide he was going to do a realistic version and have a 14-year-old Catherine, because if you follow the scene in French, she is making fun of how English words for certain body parts sound like French slang for sex. And it's a very, very funny scene in French, but it has a dual meaning with the scene where at the end where Henry attempts to woo him in French, which is of course that the kings of England up until Henry V all spoke French. Henry IV was the very first king since William the Conqueror in 1066 to take his coronation oath in English, but he still spoke colloquial French. Henry was the very first king that spoke English as his main language. It was also the first time that standardized English texts were being written, and that there were attempts to create what we now call dictionaries and things like that in the English language. Before that, the entire ruling class of England spoke exclusively French. And to have those scenes in there, which if you grew up in England, you would know that, but in the United States, maybe you didn't. But you recalls the importance of Henry as a figure in history, simply for his bringing about the English language. It, of course, had started with his grandfather, John of Gaunt, who sponsored a guy by the name of Geoffrey Chaucer to write a little book called the Canterbury Tales and some other poems that you may have been tortured with in high school and college. And it was only this Lancastrian branch of the royal family that actually had taken an interest in the English language, because of, in Richard the Second's day. It was the peasant language, and those who spoke it were peasants, and to learn a word of it was to debase yourself and to debase the entire royal family. And it was part of the reason why that branch of the family looked down on the Lancastrians was, this, and it's a very big part of the play. Richard II is this base love of this peasant language, and Olivier still included those scenes, even though unsubtitled. That scene may not make a lot of sense if you don't know enough French to get around it. The Hans, the nails, because you're not hearing those sex puns, because she's pronouncing them as if they were those French slang words that sound vaguely like the English words for parts of the human body. The neat, which is the female genitalia in French slang, just as an example. And on that note, Yazzie, now
Wait,
you
wait,
can get.
wait. Let me just quickly respond to that. First of all, that is absolutely amazing, fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I want you to know that the scene of Catherine and the English language stuff, that's my favorite scene in the movie. I think that's like in a different world from everything else in the movie, and I love that scene. And I had no idea about the sexual innuendo. It's just such a sweet, lovely scene of connectivity, of trying to connect one culture to another. And I also love that that she pronounces everything right except for neck, which he calls Nick, but she does it with such authority that it's just it's just delicious. I love that scene, and the fact that it had these double entendres just makes it all the more amazing. So thank you for sharing all of that. And speaking of language, I will cross off the last thing on my list, which is that the American Hayes Office censored this movie on two words. It mandated that they remove the word bastard and the word damn. But apparently that they had no clue about what was going on in the French. So that's pretty entertaining to know that. That's it for me.
Thank you. Hi. Hey, Matt. We're going to get to you in just a second, but yeah, Yazzie's going to school
No, I
us in
just wanted to
things
say,
of Millennium.
about the French thing. It's also nails. It's how do you say les ondes? It says Niles, and it's like. But what I liked was the emphasis on the word elbow, which is like in French is coup, and that also goes to coup d'état and like the coup. So and that I mean, she stays on the word coup and talks about like, oh, so that's what it means, like the hit of the elbow, just like coup d'état. And they also talk about that. That goes also with all the historic things that were happening in France that we talked about.
Belbo.
Also, I yeah, elbow is cool. Yeah, this, but Niles was also funny. But what I really liked about that scene, the the ending, the dialogue between Henry and Catherine was this. I said that it it brings the whole form, the whole visual aspect of the movie and the story. It comes to a circle and close the movie very beautifully with this romantic resolution. And that's why I keep saying that the movie has this fairy tale look. You know, it it's like it concludes the movie with it's very satisfying when you finish your movie as a love tale, as a love story. Also, how he humanizes Henry with that. It shows his vulnerability. It's with this like very intimate moment, and it reveals that also a king, this king in particular, because we know it about many other kings, but this king that was, yeah, we see it in Chimes of Midnight, but here in this film, at the beginning, we only see him as a war leader, you know, eh, as a king, but that shows like, oh, his desires, his insecurity, and the way that he struggles to communicate with Catherine with his broken French. But then, you know it makes the character very, a flawed king makes him very relatable. Create then instead of a very heroic figure that wasn't what necessary at the time that the movie was made. It add that to the complexity that we talked about at the beginning of the film. It Viewers could empathize with him, just like the way that his soldiers empathize with him, in a very human aspect. And, the despite the language barrier and what we talked about and what I talked about, that it all looks like an invasion to another country, it gives that aspect, like, creates a very cultural, again, I also pointed at this, a cultural exchange between these two monarchs of sorts, a king and a princess. In that conversation, it's, this, that very, the underlying theme of diplomacy and reconciliation and all that within that very, adorable dialogue between them. I think it goes also to Shakespeare's play, that how he was, how he could bring, the power of words, the power of language within, you know, with the theme of love and cultural exchange and communication and overcoming, everything and the barriers and all that.
Thanks, Yassi. Hey, welcome, Matt. Matt, I was just thinking of you the other day. The movies that made me, I had Yule Bowl or maybe it was a rerun, but I was listening to it, and I was like, gosh, I wish I had a way of back channeling Matt so I could get him a link.
Yeah, it was an older, unless it's a new episode, which it might be. It was an earlier episode. I'll have to check it out. But yeah, that's a very good picture of what the guy is like, from what I know of him, having worked on the memoir with him. But anyhow, yeah, Henry V. I had not seen this Laurence Olivier version before. I'd seen the Kenneth Branagh one, and I was just taken by, despite this being in the 40s and an older film, how like contemporary it felt. I sort of thought it would be stagey, like some older films sort of tend to be, or the camera doesn't move around as much. But I think visually it was more compelling than I was expecting, and to hear Shakespeare done in, I mean, by Laurence Olivier too, but also, I mean, of just, British actors in the 40s, with the British accents are different now, and it's fun to hear people talk like they did back then. And this was, yeah, this one's pretty good. And I regret when I went to film school. I mean, they never had a Shakespeare film class, but it would have been fun to take one if they had.
It's interesting. Now I haven't seen the Branagh version in a couple decades anyway. But the one thing I remember about the Branagh version was that it begins like in a television studio, and he's walking through the studio, giving the "Oh for a Muse of Fire" speech, and so it had kind of used the same meta that Olivier did, but had just kind of brought it up to date, which I thought was a very cool twist. But the other thing that I remember was that one of the things that I liked better about the Olivier version was I actually kind of got bored by the war scenes in the Branagh version, whereas I think the the editing of this is much better. The battle scenes, I just they go by in a flash. Uh, you understand who's winning, who's losing. When the baggage train gets attacked, when the boy that was guarding it gets killed, and then he just shouts, "I've never been angry before," and kill the prisoners, and then you're on to the next thing. It doesn't dwell, and I always wonder if it's because those scenes are probably the most expensive to film, that films generally aren't very good at editing those down to a level where they don't get monotonous and boring. But this film managed to do that for me. I think something like the Branagh version, like they put all of their money into these war scenes, and so we're going to see a bunch of it. Is how I've always felt. But Since you've seen both, can you kind of compare the two? You might have a little better memory than I do, Matt, of the two versions.
God, it's been a while for me too since I saw the Kenneth Branagh one, but I was just struck by how young Kenneth Branagh was when he made his. It was I don't think Laurence Olivier was especially old when he made this one, but just to tackle such a big Shakespeare play at that age and direct it and play the lead, and the case with the both these films is just it takes a lot of courage and I mean, yeah, it's an intimidating play, right? I mean, Henry V, or maybe not as much as King Lear, but it's up there if people are considering what are the top ones.
Well, and it's definitely a difficult role to play for sure. I have seen it performed. The Tom Hiddleston version really struck me as being somebody who just felt like the metaphor that I used is it felt like the reverse of the hippo in Fantasia, just as the dancer. This felt like a dancer dressed up as a hippo. He just didn't feel weighty enough for the part for me. But both Olivia and Branagh really delivered.
In terms of the Olivier battle scene, IMDb says it took 6 weeks to film, and on the screen it's 10 minutes. So, just to basically echo what you're saying, it takes a certain amount of discipline to turn 6 weeks of filming into to boil that down to 10 minutes. So, yeah. Oh, and Matt, always wonderful to have you here. Thank you for popping in.
And
Video
since
on the chat. Sorry. I just wanted to say I put a video on the chat, the Pauline Kael's review of and comparison of both movies, and she says that Kenneth Branagh's movie is more like a commentary to uh, the world after Vietnam War, and it's very dark, and she kind of destroys Kenneth Branagh's movie, but praise Olivier's one. The video is interesting. It's not something special. It's just someone reads the articles, and I think that's a very interesting one if you want.
how very Pauline Kael. Now that I know how to pronounce it, thanks to Hi. I did want to take a moment to because we always try to do plugs here whenever possible to let people know that Matt does have a book coming out soon. And I'm gonna have to get a refresh. I know it's a Star Trek video game guide, but I can't remember the full title. But that was available for pre-order. Please give us the title of that book, Matt.
Sure, I can post it in the chat if you want. It's a Star Trek video games, an unofficial guide to the final frontier. It's coming out through White Owl Books, which is a UK publisher. And yeah, there was a lot of fun to write. You can pre-order it on Amazon. Comes out in the US August 30th, and I'll be doing a panel on it live at Star Trek 2 Las Vegas at the Rio in August 1st. So
Very good, very good. Well, I'm going to start kind of wrapping this room up, but I'm going to just go in regular PTR order. The four of us, we happy few, and start with Yassi and just kind of get your final reflections on Henry V.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned Star Trek in Deep Space Nine has an episode, once more Undo the Bridge has, it's inspired by Henry V. Anyway, yeah, that's Shakespeare's everywhere. So the my only final thoughts was that, Olivier, he wasn't, he uh wasn't, he he brings his previous uh actings, his previous characters, his previous roles to his Shakespearean characters, Heathcliff and Wuthering Heights, everyone says like his Duenter's in Rebecca, the edge that he brings to the Hitchcockian noirish character, his Pride and Prejudice character, everything, he brings it to his Shakespearean adaptations and takes from Shakespearean characters. And the meta thing that I wanted to talk about was that how beautiful Shakespeare talks, on the uh, famous uh, the king, the Henry V speech in "O for a Muse," the way that he talks about, when he starts, uh, and before that, uh, like let's go to the beginning. He The way that Shakespeare starts his play, he says that it's like he apologizes for the flaws and for the weakness of the medium of theater. He kind of justifies himself that he is unable to create the battle scenes and the 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 horrors of war and the battles of the Middle Ages. And he cannot portray the epic scope of warfare for the audience in theater. It's like the shortcomings of theater. He kind of uh apologizes for that. And but what I think, what this is exactly what Olivier tries to depict with his opening scene. Like he says, yeah, you see this, everything looks very colorful and beautiful and stagey, and everyone's laughing, and the music and the ends and the score, it's beautiful. But there is this undertone of war and fear that it grows through, for 1.5 hours till we get to the middle of the film, and that for the first time night falls, and we see the camp in the night. That for the first time Henry hears the fear of the soldiers in the camp and everything, and he that inspires him for his speech. And but this, I think, what is so powerful uh with this, this meta theatrical, uh that, and also a very breaking the fourth wall, with like sometimes the narrator looks in the camera, or the way that you know I said it, after the death of Falstaff, this tonal shift of the movie that invites the audience in. It creates this atmosphere and tells that to the audience at the time, that we all involved in this ongoing battle, that it's happening. We are all are engaged in a war, whether it's during the Henry V or at the time during the Second World War. And I think, and the language that uh Shakespeare uses, his, uh, how can I put it, like, the I don't want to get very technical in in the literary aspect, but you know he uses the antithesis, he uses the metaphors, he uses the anaphora, the repeating of "we few, we happy few, we band of brothers." It gives this, you know he rouses the power within the crowd. We might think that, yes, this is propaganda, but I think it speaks to the power of theater, to the power of language, to the power, I always talk about it, that how I love it when cinema or literature, they become self-referential. They talk about their own flaws and their own power. So the way, the way that Shakespeare, the Henry V says that this Crispian, it's the Crispian in the calendar right now, but tomorrow we become immortal if we win this battle. Because people, they're gonna show their scars and say that yes, we were involved in this victory. And you all become, and all those nobles that are sitting at home, they wish that they were like you in the battle. And I think that's very powerful. And if this is propaganda, like I wish every movie was a propaganda movie. So, and yeah, so I really like the way that Olivier, took this power of language and play of Shakespeare. And that's why, this is the power of, that's why he get knighted after this movie. That's exactly what happened with the soldiers at the Battle of Agincourt. They become knights, they become gentlemen. And that's the same thing that happened with Olivier. He proved his power not only as the greatest actor of his generation, but as a Shakespearean director in cinema, not only in theater.
Thank you, Yazzie. And I feel the same way about this room. Uh, no matter how few people or many people show up here, I feel like those in the clubhouse now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here and hold their man and womanhood cheap, whilst any speaks that they were not here to discuss Henry V. Hi, Bender, your final
We
thought.
shall fight. Just like Churchill said, we shall fight. Whether how many people, I mean, a few people comes, within the few, we're, as you said, band of brothers.
God for Harry. Hi, your final thoughts on Henry V.
Well, first of all, let me just point out on a meta level, if this is going to be a podcast, it is normal for a podcast to have as few as one person. So we've got plenty of people for a podcast, and when you call attention to the number of people in the room, who are you helping by doing that? So I wish you wouldn't do it. I used to go to comedy shows where I think I've mentioned this before. A performer would make comments about there not being enough people in the audience. And who was that for? It just made the people who showed up feel stupid for showing up. Uh, you want to have an appreciation for what it is that we're actually providing, which I thought was a great show, and I thought you were spectacular today in all the incredible knowledge and wisdom. So I wish you just stop making comments about uh, you know that about number of people or last week you ended by calling us on that we weren't professionals, which obviously we are professionals. I just like cut it out, Eric. We've got a great room. This was a great show, and just try to just acknowledge that instead of uh, poking holes in things that don't need to be poked. Um, I want to echo Yazi's comment about DS9. I want to springboard on it. Um, DS9 is my favorite of all the Star Trek series. I think it's the most Shakespearean because it's got the most nuanced and complex set of characters and motivations for those characters. I think if you like Shakespeare and you have any interest in Star Trek, watch Star Trek DS9. It's 7 seasons and it's magnificent. It's on. I think it's on Paramount Plus. Matt, do you remember if it's on what platform it's
Yeah,
on?
yeah. The other show's on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, of course, because all the Star Trek shows are on Paramount Plus. I just remembered. I highly, highly recommend it. Um, I said I was on a war kick, um, so I actually kind of cheated and skipped ahead a little bit on this house's schedule and watched The Eagle Has Landed. Oh my God, what a great movie! Um, like if you come to one movie this month, watch The Eagle Has Landed and come to that room. Um, just amazing war movie with so many upended expectations. A very, very fascinating and smart movie. Um, and since I mentioned we're world professionals here, I will mention uh, I'm an author and a script writer and a ghostwriter. If you're listening and you ever need a book or a movie script or a TV script, please consider me. My website is bookproposal.net and high on your script.com. So, and please feel encouraged to get in touch. And also, I wanted to mention, that the experience of being here on Clubhouse and listening outside of Clubhouse is very different. So, again, I think this room works perfectly well as a podcast, and I think it works perfectly well as a clubhouse room too. But I understand, feeling a little self-conscious on the clubhouse front, but just get over it. Last week we had twice as many people. That was a great discussion. This week we had another great discussion. Eric, you always bring your A game, and stop making disparaging comments about the room. I'm done.
That's yeah, you brought that up before, High, in some other rooms, in the writers' room about the self-deprecating thing works to a point, and it ultimately works against you. It's been over 25 years, but I got to interview Kevin Smith when I was in college, and I think Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back was coming out. And especially back then, but I think even still now on his podcast, he keeps on saying what a shitty director is, and I think that's probably cost him jobs in that. I mean, is he the most visual guy? No, but like a film director doesn't have to have the most interesting shots. And a lot of times that's can be more of a cinematographer's job anyway, depending on who the director is. Anyhow, I digress. But yeah, no, thank you. This was happy to be with this group of people and talk about Shakespeare and so forth. And I guess uh, this is making me want to watch more Shakespeare films, which is never a bad thing. And I hope I mentioned Kenneth Branagh before. I hope he does more Shakespeare movies because he was on a real tear there for a bit in the 90s. And we don't get as many Shakespeare movies as we used to, but hopefully we'll get some more. I'll have to check out that more recent one you had mentioned, Eric. I've heard that one's good. They kind of did like a whole cycle of those, right, with Hiddleston and some other actors.
Yeah, the Hollow Crown cycle on BBC. They did all of the two Henriettas, the Henry the sixth and the Henry the fourth part, and Henry the fifth, Richard the second, and it ends with Richard the third, played by Benabatch Cumber, that guy. Yeah. Any other final thoughts there, Matt?
No, I love what you're doing here with the room and the podcast, and I hope you keep looking forward to next week.
Excellent, excellent. I guess I'll stop trying to lower expectations and just dance with the hand I've got. It's gonna you're gonna have to keep reminding me, High. It's just a bad habit, and they're hard to break, just like smoking or any of my other bad habits. So next week we're going to talk about a different playwright, Noel Coward, and directed by David Lean, and the film is also from 1944. This Happy Breed. This is going to be the last of our 1944 in film series. And then we're going to have an episode hosted by New York Times bestselling author, script doctor, and everything else, High Bender, on one of his favorite films, 1950s, Last Holiday, starring Alec Guinness, the following week. And then, as High mentioned, to celebrate the actual anniversary of Operation Overlord, aka D-Day, which is either June 5th or June 6th, depending on which calendar you use. On Thursday, June 6th, we will be discussing The Eagle Has Landed. To answer the question as to why we are not doing a film about D-Day, it is, as High pointed out, because The Eagle Has Landed is a kick-ass movie and much better than anything else that I could think of. And I would rather we stray a little bit off topic and talk about a better movie, and that was why that was my choice. And then the rest of the schedule up through July has been set. Yassi has an episode coming up on the 7% Solution, which has Sherlock Holmes meeting Sigmund Freud. And then there's just check out the schedule. We've got a lot of good things. And then Saturday, over in a room I created just called Eric's House, Yassi and I at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time are going to do a couple of little 1 minute blurbs to put out on the old Spotify and Apple podcast. Anybody who wants to kind of show up and give us some suggestions or might want to have a voice clip in one of those promos, it's 9 a.m. over in my Eric's house. Everybody's welcome to be there. It's not going to be an entertaining room, though. It's just a business room. We're just going to be kind of going over how we can get a couple of 1 minute clips, and then I'm going to take the download and edit them into something that we can use for not just to put on to our podcast, but I'm friends with a couple of podcasters, David Crowther of the History of England and Royfield Brown, who has like 6 or 7 different podcasts. Who I'm going to approach and see if maybe they'll put them on the front of their podcasts that are extremely popular. And again. We'll see what happens. We're not doing this with any goal in mind except just creating the best room possible. And other than that, unless anybody else has anything to add,
Sorry. Another Henry V adaptation was The King in Netflix with very, very mal-casted Timothy Chalamet as Hal, because Henry V was 6'4" tall, and I don't know. Anyway, but Joel Edgerton plays Falstaff on The King, and he's a very good Falstaff, especially because Joel Edgerton is right now, High knows, we talked about it on Dawn's Room, is in Dark Matter, Apple TV's Dark Matter, and he plays really, I mean, he delivers on those series. But yeah, and that is very historically accurate regarding the French invasion of the beginning of our conversation. The emphasis of that movie is on that part of history and the play Shakespeare's Henry V.
For those who want Shakespeare without the poetry or Elizabethan language,
Exactly.
but want to be able to understand the story better, I do recommend that. It is pretty entertaining.
I wanted to thank Kathy for for patiently listening to us. We always appreciate you being here. And I want to thank Matt again for coming. Always appreciate you being there. And of course, Yassi and Eric for being the foundation of this room.
And we all want to thank you, Hi, for being such a great member of this panel and bringing your insights and years of experience as well. On that note, unless anybody's got anything else, I'm going to bid you all a good night and hope to see you all next week for This Happy Breed. By the way, it is available on pretty much any of the formats that you can think of, but it is, if you're looking for a free version, it is on YouTube in a very good copy. And other than that,
And it's also on Criterion, if you have Criterion.
I always keep forgetting to look. That's another reason that you're a valuable part of this panel. You always check that for us. That's awesome. All right. Other than that, unless anybody's got anything, we're gonna close the room in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good night, everybody. Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.